Ladies and gentlemen, can we please be seated? We will start in 30 seconds, please. Thank you.
Hello, 1, 2, 3. Ok, alors bienvenue à tout le monde.
Welcome, everyone. Alan?
Ok, thanks. Ok, good. Ok. Alors donc,
My name is Alain Patrick Aima. I'm working with AFRINIC. I work with AFRINIC as a special project manager in charge of the two projects, APKI and DNSEC. And in the next 30 to 40 minutes, I'll have your attention to present why DNSEC and APKI in general and where we're at in this region, in the AFRINIC region, and where we're at as AFRINIC, an organization supporting and deploying services in the region, across the region. So, as you all know, in terms of security, there's a lot of things that are, many things happen. There are attacks on services. Is that okay? Ports can look for vulnerabilities on devices, take advantage of vulnerabilities, spoof packets, spew spams. So several things occur every day. So what we're interested in and what people don't always see is the attacks against the routing system. And in those attacks, or in the dysfunctions, there are attacks, and in most cases there are configuration errors, which are human errors at times, but other times software errors. And those attacks or dysfunctions can bring someone to, for example, inject prefixes of other people in the routing system to redirect the traffic to their own website, and through that they can do lots of things like attacking the DNS. And through the DNS they can lure the traffic to intercept the websites, so they can inject in the routing system and redirect the traffic and give place to several harmful things. If I succeed in attacking the routing system, I could even touch attack the root system and routing registries, TLS, uncles, which are at the core of our internet security. We have certificates from reliable authorities that we use in the browsers, so there are a lot of things that can be done, and those things can be spotted, but not by classical users. What we see now is when users want to connect in the secure mode, when they ask, do you want to continue, yes or no, they will click on yes. That means that the mechanisms that we have today to detect redirections and spoofings, for instance, always work because there are many people among the population who can't tell the difference. And those things happen every day. And what people are doing today is prefix surveillance in the routing system. And when something is going wrong, you have alerts so you can respond. But there are things occurring every day, and operators are grappling to correct them. There are dysfunctions, routing dysfunctions that some people won't even spot. Sometimes you just have a sense there's temporary dysfunction, that's internet and so on. But now the routing system that we have, which is a blind trust system, now is exposed to several things. And here you have a few examples of routing incidents. The last one, the latest one, which went viral around the world and put at the forefront the issue is the YouTube and Pakistan Telecom incident. On February the 24th, YouTube started to announce /24 from the /23 that so Pakistan Telecom started announcing a /24 from the /23 that YouTube had announced. So YouTube reacted announcing the same /24, and then in the routing system you had two /24. And what Pakistan Telecom had announced was relayed by peers. So it took some time before the ISP for Pakistan Telecom decided to block the announcements from that prefix. And that incident revealed, even to the policymakers, that, and after that there were other incidents. And every day we see incidents occurring. When you see in the routing system, sometimes you will see 41/8, 181/8 that AFRINIC never assigned to anyone. So that aggregation errors sometimes. Besides routing, you have DNS and other critical facilities that resisted well, but DNS has several levels of vulnerability that I've presented here, and how the servers trust one another, how the cache server goes for resources and information through the DNS, and the most critical point is where we talk about the crash bosoming. That's what Dan Kaminsky in 2008 drew the community's attention to. Someone here that we would call a bad guy. So the bad guy has the domain badguy.com. He can take a recursive DNS server to submit requests, and while the server is requesting, he will randomly spoof the server, hoping that one of the requests will work on the spoofed information. What is happening here exactly is that the bad guy will request from this server to look for www.etc.com. And while the request is on the way, the bad guy sends a referral saying that website is here. bankofx.com is redirected to their own website. So that's a typical cache poisoning attack on DNS, and those are realities today. There are exploits. There are software to exploit those things. In front of this situation, what can we do? We need to respond. We need to react, to do something about it. And that means look at the infrastructure. We are lucky to have a multi-layer network from the 1st up to 7th, and possibly layer 8 or 9. So we need to be able to introduce levels of security at several layers, at several places, to reinforce, strengthen the system. So we have SSL, TLS-based security today and end-to-end applications. And the idea today is to see if we cannot make the routing more secure to prevent redirections and also protect the DNS, and add to what is existing what would make the infrastructure more robust and trustworthy. In terms of routing security, we didn't fold our hands and sit back. There are several layers or levels of problems and solutions. How to protect the routing, BGP routing, that's transport between routers that are interconnected. How to protect against hacking and injection of prefixes. The access list, not easy to maintain. The solution is routing registries, but those have become today hard to manage. Even the routing registries are separated from the base, and in the information, even in especially in our region, are never up to date. That is, if we want to rely on the routing registry information, then we will reject or refuse, deny several prefixes because those are not up to date, and other techniques. So we tried everything, and meanwhile there were discussions about how to protect BGP and pursue BGP updates, and there were several suggestions, BGP SO, BGP, and we have BGP SEC being deployed. So the strategy that was developed to protect against the routing attack is to go back to the origination, to the foundation. So we're asking whether people have a reliable and electronically verifiable about the resources that they are assigned by AFRINIC. The second thing is to set up a mechanism to enable people to verify who is entitled to or who was entitled to inject a prefix in the routing system. And once we have that foundation, we can move beyond. That's how a working group was created, which is called the Secure Interdomain Routing Working Group, to work on the security of routing. And that's what brought us to what we call RPKI, resource publishing key infrastructure that helps us associate resources assigned by AFRINIC to a key under certificate I-509. So public keys are associated with resources, not identities. So what we're going to see, the one who has the private key matching the public key is entitled to use this and that IP address or autonomous system address. Then the LIR and end users can prove the entitlement to the use and open the way to create authorizations to say who is authorized to inject a prefix in the routing system. That's what APKI means. So APKI operates based on the hierarchy of resources. We'll wait for the photographer. So this is the hierarchy. So there are people assign resources to the LIRs, and there are different levels of assignment and provision of certificates, and the whole set is public key infrastructure. Then, if we come back to the AFRINIC part of it, AFRINIC will assign resources to ISP2 and issue a certificate. So the subject is ISP2, and we associate /16 to the public key, which is here, and sign with the private AFRINIC key. That's classical. Now, if ISP2 sub-assigns to ISP4, then they will also issue a certificate, and that's how it goes throughout the chain. Now, what can you do with the certificates that you have? You can have a certificate from AFRINIC that covers your resources. What can you do with that? You can sign a subject that we call route origin authorization, saying I authorize Côte d'Ivoire Telecom, MTN, and so on to inject my prefix into the routing system. If there's a prefix coming from any other source, I'm not part of it. You can also use your certificate to sign subjects in the routing registry. So APKI is not killing routing registries. We need routing registry because we have routing policies in that, and we need them. But what we can do henceforth is to sign the origin and the integrity of the resources. So there's no competition between APKI and the routing registry. You can sign updates in BGP SEC, or issue certificates, or even claim your right to the use of the resource or exchange of resources between operators. So to protect and enable verification of whoever is entitled to inject prefixes, in RPKI there's an electronically signed document which was developed, which can be signed as CMS and which appears in the repository. Sir? ISP4, for instance, wants to authorize AS 6500. Then they'll sign a document which is verifiable, which will enable anyone to verify, to check. If we had had that, we would have been able to avoid the YouTube Pakistan Telecom incident, because they would not have had accepted the prefix. RPKI and AFRINIC. Now, I presented AFRINIC has its RPKI system, which is based on the code AFRINIC, Asia Pacific Network, which was launched since January 2011. You can have information on our RPKI. This is the web link to that page. It is integrated into MyAfrinic. For those who use MyAfrinic, you have a process there which will give you access to one such page where you can see your certificate and issue the ROIs, which are the only things that we have, the ROAs interface. For former users of our RPKI infrastructure, we have, based on discussions and data collection, we revamped the interface, issue ROA, and now there's no trouble doing things now. In the past, you needed to know exactly what you needed, but now we have a more user-friendly interface. When people are on this interface, there are two complaints. You have IPv4 address range, so you need to choose. It's not just about choosing and clicking down there. You have the range up here. When you choose, you need to click plus. And many people don't click on the plus. Please select. So oftentimes people do not do that, and they come back and say there's something wrong. So you need to choose and click on the plus. On as of November 25, we have 27 organizations which activated the RPKI system with us. Not all of them have ROAs. Some, I think, just activated to see. So if you're not one in this list, I would advise that you appear on the list in the future. If you're part of the list, congratulations. Now, today, the validation tools. There's this one developed by RAP-NCC. There are many public validators, and you can see the status of all LIARs. Look here. I think we are the small ones here in terms of subject in the RPKI, so we need to make headway. We have 138 objects, ROAs, manifest, and so on, compared to some who had 7,000 objects. So we are the bottom in terms of objects. When I took a look yesterday, we had 40 valid ROAs. Now things have evolved. RPKI exists. Things exist. There's a protocol now to check the origin of prefix. Cisco and many other manufacturers made new versions. So if you want to check the origin, RPKI will look like this. You have public repositories, you have global caches, and caches, local caches and public caches communicate through R5s, and caches and routers communicate through protocol, which is whether HTTPS or HSH, and then they communicate and say, here are the valid ones, here are those that are not valid. So the routers is not in the validation crypt. So if you use a router today, you'll see there's a new BGP attribute which is called state. APKI state, so it can be state not found, it can be state valid or not. When it's adoption of APKI in general, here's the situation. Compared to the 5 RIRs. Here we're not at the bottom of the list, but in terms of performance, we are a bit behind with AFRINIC because many people activated their engines, but who did not understand what was to be done actually. If you have an ROA covering a /21 and you announce /22s, the ROA, the /21, the absence of ROA on the /21 and the absence on /22 invalidates the ROA, the /22. So if you have a /21 and announce a 22 or 23, if you only announce the 21, you invalidate the 22 and the 23, and that's a major source. That issue of prefixes, issues of mismatches create invalidations. Most people don't understand. They create an ROA and later on disaggregate for the engineering, but do not create a new ROA to cover the most specific, and that invalidates the most specific. With what we started as information, we will get there. We're working hard. We had planned a new APKI version before this meeting. Unfortunately, last-minute issues hindered that, and we are delayed, but we hope by January 2014 we'll have a new APKI system which will have new services and a certain number of things. So bear with us. AFRINIC and DNS. AFRINIC is in charge of a certain number of IPv4 and IPv6 blocks and the associated DNSs. So ever since the route was signed, ADDR ARPA and IP6 ARPA, ever since they have been signed, all the IRs were integrated into the deployment of the DNSSEC. So since April 2012, AFRINIC signed all its V4 reverses, and we have introduced the trust chain between ourselves and IANA, and we now accept DNSs through via AFRINIC or via domain objects. You can modify domain objects, add attributes, DS data attributes, or you go to My AFRINIC and add to the DS. So far we've not had many applicants. We have only one client which has signed all its zones, which has 44, maybe.
DPS, donc nous avons notre DPS qui est en ligne et qui dit.
We have a DPS online which says what we do and how we do the things we do. And regarding DNS, we have also things on the way, introducing HSM and introducing new key management processes, and have internal functions, and the keys rollover, a complete key rollover. So that's the DNSSEC. To have further information, if you have any questions, we have we send updates to the list. anytime there's an activity or rollover. If you note something, you can keep us posted. So that's what I had to say. I think we'll take questions later on. Thank you for your attention. I hope I was not too technical and too complex.
Thank you, Anam, for that. And now for our second speaker, also talking about some of the projects AFRINIC is involved with. We have Nishal. Would you please? Yeah, and Nishal's slides, please. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. I will speak in English. My name is Nishal Gobardhan. I am the Senior Project Manager for Global Infrastructure at AFRINIC. And I'm very pleased to be here in a very pleasant Côte d'Ivoire this morning. I hope you're all having an interesting meeting. My talk is a technical talk, but I promise to try to keep it as simple as possible. Firstly, because it's lunch, almost lunchtime, and I don't think very well on an empty stomach, so I want to keep it simple. But also because I'd like you to participate at the end of this talk, to engage myself as well as Alain in the question and answer section that we have. For the techies in the room who are going to doze off and say that this is too simple, I'm very happy to speak to you outside to discuss what we're talking about in greater detail. So I'm here to talk to you today about two projects that AFRINIC run, or two large-scale projects that AFRINIC run that I'm especially responsible for. The first is the Internet Exchange Point Support Initiatives. So to give you an idea of some of the work that AFRINIC does in helping to build infrastructure and helping to build infrastructure really in Africa. And again, I'll remind you, my bias is exactly that, on building infrastructure. I'm not a coder. I don't write code except really bad shell scripts that Alain laughs at me at. My bias is all about how do we make infrastructure in Africa better, and that's my point of view. Well, I'll be speaking from that perspective. So from an AFRINIC perspective, internet exchange points are treated as critical internet infrastructure. So as you'd probably know, if you've been a regular at the AFRINIC meetings, you'll know that we work according to policies. Everything that AFRINIC does is policies. In the next few days, you'll learn a lot more about this. If you're a newcomer, don't worry, there'll be lots and lots of discussions about this. And we have a policy at AFRINIC that says anything that we do relating in particular to internet exchange points, well, we see them as critical infrastructure. So through our policy process, the internet number resources, the fundamental thing that AFRINIC does when we hand out address space or we hand out autonomous system numbers to you, we make these available immediately to internet exchange points at no cost. Now, I'm saying immediately because it's really, really easy to get these resources. If you're a registered internet exchange point, if you're a validated internet exchange point, our registration services team obviously has some criteria that you've got to justify. Well, you've got to show you're running an exchange point and it's running out of a proper environment and not just, out of somebody's backyard, really. But the process is really, really simple. So if you're in Africa right now and you're thinking about starting an exchange point, or you're thinking about developing your internet exchange point, and you're wondering, how can I get IP addresses for these? How can I get an autonomous system number? Or you have old IP addresses, perhaps from some legacy system that might be charging you lots and lots of money for your simple internet exchange point requests. Well, you can speak to myself, you can speak to our member services team, the wonderful people at the booth at the front, and we'll help you get what you need to make those, to make your internet exchange point grow. Now, our perspective has always been from the start that we do not do box drops. It's very easy to get somebody that comes in, puts in this magic black box that has just 2 blinking lights, because of course the fewer blinking lights it has, the more secure it is, right? So it's very easy to get somebody to come in and do that and just deliver what you need to get done for that specific project, and move away. Our focus is all about building growth and sustainability. It's key to what we believe in at AFRINIC. So for us, the internet exchange points, or developing an internet exchange point in your environment, is not just about putting in a simple switch. And again, I can see the techies going, oh, but it is a simple switch. Absolutely. But there's an ecosystem, and there's an environment that has to be developed around that. And what we do for that is we work with several partners. One of our key partners in these initiatives is ISOC, and I think I saw him in the room earlier on. Michuki, can you raise your hand? There we go. So Michuki Mwangi is one of our really good collaborators. He's from ISOC. We work with ISOC as part of the Access project to help do that, to help develop competency, best practice, and again, the elements that we see that are necessary for growth and sustainability in your environment. Not a layer 2 switch. Anybody can come in, give you a switch. We want to help you develop and grow that environment. We believe you, as the local stake owners, should own, should support, and should manage this. And that's what we try to do. So from an AFRINIC perspective, we've worked very closely with the ISOC team. We've gone through 7 different countries, and we've managed to teach, and I really like the words that came out of the speech this morning, developing best practices. That's what we want to see. That's what we do. We help you to develop and work with you to educate you on what we see as global best practices, in this case, particularly about internet exchange points. This is an ongoing project, so it's something that we've been working with. It's something that we've been doing for a while now with Access, with Access and ISOC, and we hope to continue that. In addition, what we also do is we obviously have skilled engineering people that have been involved in things like running exchange points or developing these things. So we offer expert technical assistance with sustainability rebuilds. Again, that's not about redesigning your infrastructure. We have no interest in taking any infrastructure away from you. What we want to do is help you build and develop. So we have intellectual property that we work to deliver to your local environment to make it, well, we think to make it easier and better to grow your local environment. And the example that I have is we're currently working with an exchange point, an established exchange point in the SADC region to help them re-architect their environment to support this. And if you have a particular interest in especially internet exchange points, you're welcome to speak to myself, or my colleague Elaine, or really any of the AFRINIC team, and we'll try to get you immediately the help that you absolutely need. I'm going to spend some time talking about some of the DNS programs that we run at AFRINIC as well. So you will see this on our website. One of our goals, really, being where we are in the internet ecosystem, is to support and develop internet usage and internet infrastructure. So everything that I'm going to talk about, the next 3 projects, you have to know that we make them, we do them, and we make them available to the community at 0 cost, right? The 3 projects are the African Root Server Copy Project, the African-supported RFC 5855, and don't worry, I'm not going to explain the RFC, and the DNS support program that we do. So going from the top, the idea of the Root Server Copy Project is to be able to help facilitate a local community, something like Cote d'Ivoire or Abidjan, to help get a copy of the DNS root inside your local environment. Now this is important for really, really many reasons. It comes down to being able to protect your environment in terms of failure modes. If there's, heaven forbid, if there's ever a cut on cable systems, or if Big Brother decides for some reason that they want to play Snowden or NSA games with you, or whatever the case is, you want to develop your infrastructure. An important part of that is having local access to the DNS roots. And of course, there's other elements that go with that as well, having local access to a whole bunch of other infrastructure, your CCTLD and everything else. But the DNS root is really, really key to this. And what the root server project does at AFRINIC is to help you develop an environment that can facilitate and host this critical internet resource element. And that's not critical resource element by our definition. It really is what is seen as a critical internet resource development. Now, traditionally, this was a project that we had run for a while, and we were targeting internet exchange points, developed internet exchange points in Africa. And one of the problems we had was that internet exchange points there weren't really all those many internet exchange points. So if you look at one of the slides I have, well, the slide that's up there now, you'll see my little triangle shows you active internet exchange points. And I was very, very pleased, was it like this Saturday when I arrived, to be able to put a little green triangle in Côte d'Ivoire, in Abidjan again. So congratulations to the civics team if you're on site, and to the Ivorians. It's great to see that you have an exchange point up and running now. You'll see also the distribution of DNS routes in Africa. And does it work? Yeah. So there's an obvious bias. You'll see there's lots and lots of routes down south. I'm South African. That has nothing to do with why there are routes there, by the way. It's just that they have an active community. And you'll see some of the routes that have been put up in other places. Cairo, for instance, has at least 3. There's a route out there in Tunisia. And, well, there are routes in Côte d'Ivoire as well, which is great. It's good to see the picture. It's good to see elements stand out. But it's more important to see that there are lots of white holes in the map. There are lots of gaps. And when I look at infrastructure, that's always a problem for me. It's a problem seeing these gaps and saying, how do we work to fix this kind of stuff? So as I said, one of the problems we had initially was where there was an internet exchange point, there wasn't really the environment to put in a root server. So the IX projects that I was telling you about later, what we're doing is we're working with the operators to try again to develop those exchange points so we can fill in, for instance, places like that may or may not have a root server. We're working to get equipment and the necessary critical resources there to be able to develop that. We're also working through some of the other access projects to add more triangles onto my map as well. But again, while we're working to get the triangles, the internet exchange points on board, one of the important things we have to recognize is that we're not always going to be successful. We're not always going to be able to get things in time, things in place timeously for us. So we're working with other operators, and for us it's about developing partnerships and relationships with key elements. You'll see a picture of my CEO signing an MOU with Fadi from ICANN a while ago, where we've agreed to help develop and support L routes in Africa. And one thing that's, I guess, slightly different about the L route compared to many of the other operators is that they're very happy to go into an environment that doesn't necessarily have an internet exchange point and deploy a root server there. And a good example at the time was Côte d'Ivoire. It was, I think, I'm sorry, my brain is getting mush these days, but I think it was about, yeah, at the end of last year that we put we helped with the local community, we helped to get a copy of the L route in Abidjan at the time. And there are actually 2 right now. So we worked with the community, we got a copy of L route installed, you had a DNS server up and running in the country, a root DNS server, before you had your exchange point through development of partnerships like you've seen on the slide before that. So some recent activities, as I say, we've got an L route in Abidjan, we've got an I route in Kigali recently, there's another L route that's gone in through ICANN. We have equipment on the ground. Sometimes this takes a little longer than we'd like, but we have equipment on the ground in 3 more cities in Africa, and we're in advanced stages of completion in another 3, and that's my very diplomatic way of saying we're negotiating, we're working with the operators to develop their environments, and we're happy that these 3 environments are good to go. I guess the important part of the slide for those of you who were looking at the map and going, hey, why is my country in white, is that we are accepting new applicants to the program, right? You can email that email address, and that'll come through to myself, it'll come through to Alain and the rest of the team, and we're very happy to talk to you and discuss helping to get a route in your country. There's also a web form on our website, so if you go to afrinic.net, it's initiatives, DNS root copy, you can fill out the web form, and again, that's something that we'll respond to you on. And I spoke a little bit about this already, why you'd want the DNS route. Again, performance improvements, attack mitigation. I don't want to make this too much of a technical talk, so you're happy to speak to me outside to talk about the benefits really about getting this inside your environment. The second project that I will speak very quickly about is the AFRINIC-supported RFC 5855 services, which is a fancy way. So RFC 5855 describes the stable naming system for the IP6.ARPA and in-adder ARPA services. That's a geeky way of saying it's how we get reverse DNS done in the internet-related world. And some time ago, in 2010, the RFC was written, made published, and AFRINIC, along with the other RIRs and the ICANN, the 6 of us, were responsible for making this zone, these zones rather, IP6 ARPA, in-adder ARPA, available to everybody in the community. We've been doing that since 2010, 1st December 2010, and for in-adder ARPA, we've been doing that since early 2011. And of course, no technical slide is ever complete if you don't have statistics. So you can see some statistics from our IP6 ARPA showing we're doing about 1,500 queries a second and about 3,000 queries a second for in-adder ARPA. There's a big note saying my time is up, but I'm certain they're lying because I've only been here for 15 minutes, and I still have another 15. I should still have another 15. It's not clicking. Hello? Good engineering people always have backup plans. I run my own timer. All right, so okay, that's a lot of geek stuff, but honestly, why is this important for you? Again, if you're an operator, if you're running stuff in this country, then what's important is that we have a localized Anycast program where we're able to work with people in your immediate environment, if you're an operator in this country, to bring this to you. And for me, that's important. For me, that's great because it's all about getting the content. It's about getting any element of content closer to the individuals, closer to the networking people, the home users. And, well, now AFRINIC is in a position to support that. The last one that I'll talk about, and I won't be long, Ernest, don't worry, is the African DNS support program. So to get a lot of our work done, to get a lot of our projects done, and you'll hear Naraya come up and talk about some of the stuff they're building, we're having to develop our own mini cloud environment, our own infrastructure throughout the region, throughout the continent. And of course, as you know today, there's more computing power in this thing than there was on the first space shuttle that went off and took light into space. So we've got lots of spare capacity, right? And one of the projects we decided that was a really good idea to do was to try to help bolster some of the CCTLDs in Africa, to make them more accessible, to make them more visible, in particular to Africans, okay? So we have this project called the African DNS Support Project. And what we do is we secondary African CCTLDs free of charge. And we deploy that infrastructure, or we deploy the secondaries across the infrastructure that we're building all across Africa. So right now we have about 20 African CCTLDs on board, and we're in advanced stages of setup with another 3, meaning we're just waiting for them to hit click. And I see some of them in this room, so I hope to spend time with you after this, so that we can move that number 20 into 23. The sign-up page is on our website, and you can, if you're interested, if you run a CCTLD in Africa, please look through it or speak to myself or one of the AFRINIC team. So, you know, I hate pointing this out, but nothing really makes this clearer to look at than if you look at my map and if you see all the white elements. So I tried to keep the map simple. If this is Africa, the 54 odd countries we're looking at, the greens are the countries that have responded to us, that have said, we're happy to work with you, AFRINIC, well, we'll let you carry a copy of the zone for our country, and you can make this available. Yellows are the countries that we've had negotiations with. We're talking to them. We're working through the system, I should say, to get them on board. But again, the alarming problem is the white. These are CCTLDs or CCTLD managers or operators that have just not responded. So please take a minute, look at the map. If you see your country represented as white, And if you're part of the CCTLD management team, or you know the CCTLD management team, or you have a cousin, mother, brother, girlfriend, boyfriend, we don't judge, uncle, if you're one of those that are listed as white, please come speak to me. We can help make your infrastructure better. Really, we absolutely can. So, some simple details. We have diverse nodes in Johannesburg and Cape Town. We're installing in 3 more regions, and that actually warrants discussion. Somebody asked me earlier on this week, they said, but there are professional DNS operators out there. The people like the Affiliases and the people like whoever else is doing it these days, the ISCs. What's so special about the African project? What's really interesting about this? So for me, really, the essential difference we have is that while there are really good DNS Anycast operators out there, none of them are targeting our region. None of them are building infrastructure in your region. If I'm in South Africa, and if I want to resolve Gabon.ga, my packets are leaving the continent. My packets are going somewhere in Europe or somewhere in the United States just to get a simple mail across to probably the regulator or a new friend that I made at this meeting. Why do we need to do that? If AFRINIC is deploying infrastructure in these countries to support a whole bunch of other projects, and you've heard me talk about a few of these, and if we can make the .GAs, the .ZAs, pick a country, available for resolution immediately in Africa, is that not a good thing for African DNS resolution? Is that not a good thing for us helping to keep our content, our information on our continent? Well, I certainly think so. And that's why we started this project. That's why I twisted Adiel's arm in 2011. And I think we've been marginally successful. And, well, we're getting better at it now, at getting more people involved. It started as a 3-stage project. So obviously, our first part of it was to be able to collect participants. And we've gotten, like I said, 23 odd people right now on board. We're now deploying infrastructure. So we have sites in Johannesburg and Cape Town. This week, we're supposed to be turning up something in Tunisia. It's probably delayed because of the meeting, so we'll do it in December. We're shipping equipment to 2 other countries, one in East Africa, a small country, and another large country in West Africa that have kindly volunteered. So that's part of what we see as phase 2, where we're deploying additional infrastructure, and we want to work with the local operators. We want to find people that are willing to say, AFRINIC will host the infrastructure for you. We're willing to work with you so that we can make what you have available to us in our local environment. And, well, we'll eventually get to the third part, which is a lot of the DNS portal stuff, the Qt web interface stuff. So I'm going to donate the rest of my time to questions and answers rather than stand here. But if you have questions, or if you want to talk to us about any of the projects and you don't necessarily want to use the web forms, our generic email address is contact@afrinic.net, and that will get through to, well, a whole bunch of people. So thank you very much, and I'll wait for your questions.
Thank you, Nishal, for that. And now the mic.
Merci.
Yes, and for anybody asking a question, please state name and affiliation, please, for the more participants.
Hello. Yes, now it works. Nishal, thank you for this presentation. Jan George, speaking as a random internet citizen off the street on my personal capacity. So you said that you are putting the secondaries for African CCTLDs. And you mentioned that you're trying to improve the DNS experience for African people. But I think that African people does not only try to resolve only the African domains. So you ever thought of also putting some secondaries of other CCTLDs, like, I don't know, for this region, maybe .fr or something like this. I'm sure you have the data from the root server, which queries, DNS queries are most often, and maybe you could develop the idea of also putting other secondaries and improve the DNS experience for the local people in Africa. I don't know, just an idea. Thank you.
And let me take Michuki's question, then, yeah, we answer a bunch of questions all at once.
Okay, Michuki Mwangi, Internet Society. I have a question, and this is very specific to AFRINIC, so Hisham and Nishal. With respect to IP address resources to IXPs. At present, you give the first block of the /24 and an AS number for free to an IXP, but that's not sufficient to run an IXP properly. Basically, it provides access, the first /24 and AS, assuming that you're setting up a root server for the AS number, and it also, you use the /24 for the LAN peering. If you want to set up a fully proper setup IXP, then you need to provide transit to the basic services. And if some of your additional projects, such as the DNS server project, which comes in as value-add services to the exchange point, needs to happen, then the IXP needs transit. A request for an IXP IPv4 and AS number for transit comes attached with an invoice. Is there a way we can fix that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll answer Jan's question first. I'm sorry, Jan. So there's one thing I want to make clear. We facilitate the installation of the root servers. I actually do not have statistics, and I don't think it would be necessarily appropriate for me from a privacy perspective to have anything that the root operator themselves do not make publicly available. So no, I actually, although we've worked with the locals to get an L root installed, I can't give you any more information than what you would find available from any root operator. Some are better than the others, and we thank them for that, but we don't get any special privileges other than just having a relationship and being able to introduce you. So sorry, that wasn't part of your question, but I did want to make that clear. The second part of it, which is, have we thought about working beyond the African CCTLD space? Well, for very obvious reasons, our bias is set towards African CCTLDs, right? It's fairly obvious that, well, we're AFRINIC, we want to develop infrastructure in our region, and this is really where our goal is. And please remember that we're doing this not as a key infrastructure. Well, we see it as a key infrastructure element, something that's necessary for our region, but it's an addendum to a lot of other projects that we're doing. And that's why I was careful to say we are building infrastructure. We have to build infrastructure to support our basic needs, our basic growth requirements in the region, but we're not a DNS operator. We're never aiming to be an affiliate. What we're aiming to do is, and I'm sorry for naming people, everybody knows who they are. What we're aiming to do is just work specifically within our region. I agree with you, being able to get a copy of a .fr for this part of the world, probably .uk for my home country, South Africa, would be really, really, really useful. But our focus for now is primarily on being able to, as I said, support ourselves. I would love at some point to be able to say we want to support pretty much anything that our community would like, but again, we're guided by policy in pretty much everything that we do. So although there's no real policy, I guess, for how we should run and manage DNS, because it's not something that's key, it's something I'd love our community to step up to and say, this is something we want or this is something we need. I don't really want to be prescriptive in that regard. I hope that's answered your question. Yeah? The second issue,
sorry, for the first one, just to add some comments about the data. ICANN through RSAC, which is the group for how they communicate with root server operators, has asked root ops, the group of root server operators, to actually provide this data publicly. So from Q1 next year. Actually, most of this data will be available. Obviously, the private parts will be taken off, but the stats will be available through the route operators. The second, and I want to add a question, which I expected Jan to ask, but I assume that your DNS operations for secondaries, you also support IPv6 on all of the clusters. So I think that that's an additional benefit, because if they use you as secondary, they will already have IPv6.
Sorry, you didn't say name and affiliation.
Oh, sorry, forgot. Kaveh arranged by RIPE NCC. Sorry.
Kaveh neglected to mention that the RIPE NCC is also an operator of a root server, the K-root, so he can tell you a lot more about the RSAC stuff than I can at this point. That's why he mentioned that. And absolutely, yes, everything we do is IPv6 enabled. I'm sorry, and I always get punched when I say this, so I've got to be careful because I'm sitting next to the IPv6 program manager. For me, doing something with IPv6 is a given, so I don't mention it in particular because it's something I do by default. The infrastructure that we deploy is also DNSSEC aware, and it has all the other nice ticks that you'd expect us to have. We can do the specifics later. You want to take the question or you want me to answer? Okay, and Hisham's asked me to answer the other question. So Michugi, regarding the address space, it is my belief that the policy declares internet exchange points as critical infrastructure, and that you should be able to get address space for it. It is also my belief that the policy does not stipulate what is or is not free, and that's an operational issue that I'm pretty certain you can clear up with our member services team that are sitting outside. What might be really useful if you want to help guide the process is to propose and suggest. I mean, you guys, most of you probably know how the process works, and if you don't, you'll find out over the next 2 days, is to suggest perhaps an addition to the policy, an amendment that says this is literally what we'd like to see happen, particularly in the case of critical internet infrastructure.
Yes, Mathieu, your question?
Yes. Mathieu Bonessa, Jaguar Network. Just to come back on the .frTLD, there is ongoing project with the AFRINIC and different partners to put copies of the .fr zone in French-speaking countries. So if you are from a French-speaking country in Africa and want to know more, come see me.
So, any more questions from the floor? I don't see anybody queuing. So, okay. Sorry. No, so, okay, so I have a question for you, Nichelle. It's a very simple question. But, you know, I like, you know, having things very simple. And your presentation was very, very elaborate and very well done. Thank you for that. But, so, if I am from a country that doesn't have an exchange point now and doesn't have a root name server, okay, what can I take out of this meeting and go back to my country and start doing now? What can I go say? I went to an AFRINIC meeting, I heard about these issues. What's the next step after that?
That's a really good question, Hisham. Would someone from the audience like to maybe? No. At the start of the day, the first presentation this morning, you heard about best practices. You heard about saying this is what we want to do in terms of getting IPv6 working with best practices, and you heard a lot about how the AFRINIC team has engaged the locals and worked with the locals to do specifically IPv6 best practices stuff. That's exactly what we're doing, right? What we're doing with a lot of these projects is to work with the operators again to get this best practice stuff in place. So I'm not going to keep all of you here because it is just before lunchtime, unless you want me to go into detail. But we're doing that. We have best practices that work to help you build and engage your local community and infrastructure in your local environment that can then support this. You know, these are the elements that you would want, and I have loads of documentation. I write lots of PDFs these days that I think would be very useful to you. So you're welcome to grab me outside. I'm here all week, and I'm more than happy to sit down and discuss the specific elements of what you may need in your particular environment, or to share with you some of the work that we've been doing. And I mean, you'll hear this come through for the next couple of days, I believe, as well. That's what we want to do. I think the message that AFRINIC is saying is we want to help you guys develop stuff, and we're good at some parts of it, we're trying to get better at other parts of it, and we're making that available to you now.
So I have another question for Alan now. So on RPKI. So it's kind of similar question. So you mentioned that, you know, the number of ROAs in the AFRINIC region aren't really that high. How can I, somebody sitting in the audience, try to help make those numbers go up? What can I start doing?
Yeah. No. Okay, thank you, Isham, for speaking on behalf of the community. And okay, so on Saturday we had a full day tutorial on RPKI and explain to people how to activate the engine, how to create ROA, how to go up through the validation. And at the end of the day, we had 2 new engines. So 2 members in the room managed to set up the RPKI system. So what I would like, and as I said, I'll be happy to talk to more members in the room and sit down with them and go through the process. The process is, if you want to use our RPKI hosted system, you need to get what we call BPKI certificate, business PKI certificate, which is an identity certificate AFRINIC issue to authenticate the members. Okay, the process as it is now is, if you are admin contact, you need to get yourself authenticated by sending IDs, etc., to registration service. When then the admin contact certificate is approved and issued, then admin contact is called to validate certificate request for the techies contact. So once that is done, then you just go to My AFRINIC, browse to resource certification, and click on activate engine. That is magic. That is all. So I'm happy to talk to people and sit down with people and help them.
Thank you. Jan George, Internet Society. In RIPE region, we have this very good tutorial about how to set up the RPKI, from the validator to a router, how you validate and so on. And we learned through the years of operations that people install and configure things that are recommended by default. So they just copy-paste something from the web and hope that it's working. And my question is, what are you recommending as a default behavior for validating ROAS on the router, or to install it with a different local pref? So it's like 110, 190 for invalid routes, or you recommend to drop the invalid routes, because this is really important for the future development of RPKI. So what is your default recommendation?
In terms of recommendation, first thing in our region, as you saw in my presentation, we are still struggling to get more people to activate the engine, request certificate, and issue ROAS. And we are fighting now to tell people that, for example, how you should create and maintain the ROA. As I said, what we have, if you look at the repository, and if you go through the validation, you see we have 49% of invalid. And then this come from people not doing the right thing in terms of issuing ROA. As I said, you have a ROA for a /21, and you advertise /22. /22 is invalid because you have a ROA saying you must advertise the /21. So first thing is, we tell people your ROA should follow what you are announcing in the routing table. First thing. And the second, now in terms of validation, the recommendation is very simple. Local preference. Go for valid first, unknown, not found, and then valid. But don't drop now. If you drop, so you open a case where who is going to take the blame? Something break, okay? So we have the same issue like DNSSEC. So if the signature expired and the validation failed, so between the validator and the signer, who take the blames? So my recommendation is set your local preference, go for values unknown or not found, and invalid, but don't drop now. So as we go, we may go to a stage where we can start dropping invalid.
Just to add to that, what we also do when we talk about RPKI in classes, at least I know I do this, is we always tell you, develop a policy that works for yourself. So I run an RPKI validator in my home. I'm a bit strange, I know, but I run an RPKI validator in my home, and I do it the other way around. I actually make the invalids a higher preference than anything else, because I'm collecting information that I'm sharing with a researcher overseas, but that's exactly what I do. So rather than, and I always say this, rather than copy and paste a policy that has come from someone without understanding it, work to identify what you need, what you're trying to achieve out of this exercise. And if you need help, Alain has an excellent team that's supporting him. I think it's rpkihelp@afrinic.net. But if you go to our website, you'll find out how to get in touch with the really clueful RPKI team. And they can even help you understand what might specifically work in your environment. So, use that as well.
Develop your own policy, but don't give high priority to invalid. Nishal is Nishal.
Okay, so if I don't see any more questions or comments, I would like to thank you all and thank my panelists. So please join me in giving them a round of applause. And I think lunch should be ready, Babusha, right? Where will it be served? So please. So you should all have your lunch coupons by now. If not, please see Babusha, and she will give you a coupon, and lunch will be served, as always, in the restaurant. Thank you very much. We reconvene back at 1:30. Thank you.